When you open up a map of Dartmoor, you see the contours of the hills, dotted paths and snaking rivers. But not the depth of the mires, nor the density of the grass, or the thickness of the mists. No map can convey how easy it is to become disoriented on the open moors. So how hard could it be to cross in a perfectly straight line?
So tomorrow we'll be embarking on a straight line mission across the whole of Dartmoor. We'll be walking from Meldon Reservoir at the very northern edge of Dartmoor, right the way down to the Ugborough Beacon on the southern tip.
It's just Ugborough Beacon.
Okay.
Our aim was simple. Walk the 33 kilometres between the reservoir and the beacon without deviating more than 25 metres from the straight line between the 2 points we had chosen. Any obstacles in our way would have to be tackled head-on, without deviation. Only the quick jaunt from the car park to the official starting point was on a marked path.
Right, this is the start.
From here on in, it was all off-piste.
How do you feel?
Oh, knackered already.
Our first ascent was steep, but made the view at the top all the better. The terrain was mild, and we admired our surroundings as we approached our first river crossing. But the obstacles we were bound to encounter were always with us. As well as steep, slippery climbs and the possibility of deep, impassable bogs, there were also at least 2 potentially trip-ending rivers to cross on the second day, whose depths we could only guess at. Our fears were not alleviated when we reached our first, smaller river to find it much more daunting than we had expected. Now, how was this going to work? The trip had only just begun, and we were desperate to keep our precious feet dry. Yet the rocks were slick with algae and moss. Choosing to throw his bag, Ross was bound to fall victim to Newton's third law of motion. You know, the one about how every action has an equal but opposite reaction? But by the skin of his teeth, he made it. Our escape from what could have been a very cold reality check felt narrow. We soon encountered a steeper, rockier obstacle. Then the rains came, sudden and unwelcome. The grassy incline was not only steep and uneven, but now slippery too. What we needed was a snack.
I think we've seen some of the hardest bits. We can get through this, then I don't see it can get much worse.
Things immediately got worse. As we entered the military firing zone, the bogs made an appearance. We had to carefully pick our way through the saturated land to avoid getting stuck. Despite our best efforts, our feet could not be spared the pervasive wetness of the bog. We started to look forward to our next climb, hoping the higher ground of Fir Tor would be drier. Naturally, the whole route was littered with hidden waterways that are impossible to avoid in the thick grass. So our feet remained cold and wet. Our spirits were inexplicably high as we finally reached the drier, rocky outcrop of Fir Tor. Its large boulders required only a small scramble to maintain our line. Too soon, though, we had crossed the Tor, right back into a wide expanse of puddle-ridden tufts of grass. Progress was slow and tedious, but the sunset cast a warm glow over us. Excitement mounted as we approached our camping spot. Our camp marked the spot we needed to reach at the end of day 1 if we were to complete the hike in the planned 2 days, and we were chuffed to have made it in time. Unfortunately, this was not the right spot. Our target was 2.5 kilometers further down the line, and no way were we putting our wet shoes back on to hike through the dark. So we went to bed with spirits as damp as our socks. Day 2 had a more auspicious start. The rain had cleared, revealing a staggeringly beautiful sunrise. We felt more optimistic.
Oh, that's wet.
Even though we had distance to make up for, and a potentially uncrossable river in our way, Ross had a foolproof strategy for dealing with the uncertainty.
I'm trying not to think about it till we get there, to be honest.
And with that positive attitude in mind, we plodded on through boggy pastures and past tors. We even had the incredible fortune of our line passing right through this gap in a wall. We were now approaching another critical point on our line, a resupply of food. We had buried enough for 1 extra night of camping as a worst-case scenario, but no more. So we really did have to pick up our pace to finish before lunchtime on the 3rd day. Knowing we had to make great strides today, our tricky river came into view. We had no idea how deep, fast or cold it would be, and we were reluctant to soak ourselves in frigid waters given that we were bound to camp on the moors again that night. We pondered, and then went for it.
Come on. Let's try and dry off a bit.
Okay, that was surprisingly easy, but Ross was overly optimistic if he thought Dartmoor would be so generous as to let him dry off. Approaching the next river with more confidence, Ross stepped in with a smile and crossed with ease.
Strong current though.
Now, after 2 river crossings and with the clouds growing, we started to feel the cold seep into our bodies. So we wrapped up and continued along our line through more fields of tufty grass. We continued on a little way until we came across a steep drop
Oh, it's a steep drop.
and picked our way down cautiously, trying to avoid injuring our ankles in the maze of animal tracks hidden below the knee-high grass. Our line incredibly passed through a second gap in a wall, and then, unsurprisingly, through yet another river. Before climbing back up an even steeper slope than the one we came down moments before. By this point, our feet were starting to feel the toll of having been wet and cold for hours on end. We were fed up of walking through clumpy grass and over damp rocks, which slowed progress and constantly threatened to twist our ankles.
That's slippery.
However, all of this was put into perspective when we met someone who was having an even worse day than us. We were now ready to find a camping spot, but the marshy, uneven ground stretched out endlessly in front of us, presenting no opportunity to stop. It was interminable and stressful, not knowing if we would find somewhere to sleep before nightfall. And then, just as we were losing hope, a tiny patch of green, flat grass miraculously appeared right on our line.
We did it. Day 2.
Yeah, we did.
Time to get some socks on.
We went to bed in fairly high spirits, happy with what we had achieved that day. By the morning, though, things had changed a bit.
I think it's going to be interesting with all this fog to begin with, and I'm not really sure what's going to be over the next hill.
Still, we ate from our dwindling food supply, and despite our wet shoes,
It's miserable.
we set off in high spirits, knowing that if today went well, we would have successfully crossed Dartmoor in a completely straight line. Wow, what do you think of the view?
Oh, it's stunning, isn't it?
But we shouldn't have got ahead of ourselves. The fog lingered,
Quite scary, actually.
and as soon as we left the flat ground of our camping spot, the grass became higher and denser than anything we had experienced before. Our legs worked overtime to maintain a pace much slower than the days before. The lack of food didn't help. We worried that at this pace it would be impossible to finish before lunch. As we had no more food, ending this mission soon was becoming critical.
He's down.
Every setback became more and more wearisome and demoralising. The only thing to do was count on sheer stubbornness to see us through.
That was brutal. Honestly, that was one of the worst bits. I don't know why we did this.
All we could do was push on, and after a horrible slog, something amazing happened.
Finally, we can see the Ugborough Beacon just over there. That's our end point.
The excitement of being so close put a pep in our step, allowing us to power through the gorse that had suddenly appeared en route. Now, the only thing standing between us and victory was a fiendishly steep incline.
I'm in pain. It's burning up my legs here. This is probably the steepest bit of the climb. Yes! Yes! We did it.
Oh, we did it.
Wow. Oh my god. We may be the first people to have crossed Dartmoor in a completely straight line, and it feels amazing. Well, now I can walk whichever way I want.
Oh, not that way.
Oh, this way then. So there you have it. We successfully managed to cross Dartmoor in a completely straight line. I just wanted to make a quick shout out to Tom Davies, who runs the GeoWizard YouTube channel. He's the original pioneer of the straight line mission, and he was our inspiration to do this. He also came up with a ranking system for the straight line mission, which states that if you stay within 25 meters of your designated line, then that's considered a platinum run. And I'm happy to report that we were able to stay within 25 meters throughout our entire line. I'm now going to do a short line review, looking in a little bit more detail at our route and some of the obstacles that we faced. So if we take a look here on Google Earth, what we can see on the map is our beautiful straight line going all the way across Dartmoor. And we have the white line, which indicates the initial line that we plotted into Google Earth. That's the line we followed on the mission. And then the squiggly colored lines that appear overlaid are the actual route that we took on the mission. So I can pull up an elevation guide here so you can see just how steep the first hills were on our first day. And then you can see we were consistently dropping down on the second day, with the two troughs representing the deep rivers that we had to wade through. And then on the third day, it was a pretty gradual descent before we had one final big climb up to Ugborough Beacon. So let's go in right at the start. This is Meldon Reservoir, which is pretty much the northern tip of Dartmoor. We didn't really fancy swimming across the reservoir, so we started on the southern side. So here's our starting point on the banks of the reservoir. And we started off pretty steady. And then at the top of this hill, you can see the first deviation from the line, which I thought was quite big at the time. Turns out it's about 16 meters or so off our line, so that was fine. You can see where we took our first break, up at the top of the hill. And then we continued and kept pretty well en route. So this is our first camping spot for the first night. And you can see that actually we managed to camp within 25 meters of the line, even though that's not the requirement of the mission. So on the second day, we stayed pretty much bang on line up until this point. This was our first big river crossing, and for some reason we managed to deviate about 22 meters or so, 22.5 meters offline. I think I was just worrying a lot about the river, and I kind of took my eye off the ball for a second. So you can see there were a few deviations on this day, although again this could be due to the GPS, because I felt like we were bang on line for most of this day. This is one point where I felt like we were deviating at the time, but in reality we were only within 10 or 15 meters off the line. This is where we had a really steep crossing down to a river. And then this was just wide open moor. It felt like it was going on forever at this point as we were looking for our camping spot. And we got really lucky. We found this tiny patch of grass on the hillside just in time. So moving on to the final day, we managed to keep pretty much on line the whole time. No deviations greater than about 10 meters or so, I'd say. And so you can see here we're making our way towards the end point. We came to our last couple of small brooks. And so actually the biggest deviations on day 3 probably came in this patch here, which was packed full of gorse, which you can actually see on the Google Earth here. But we deviated no more than about 12 or 13 meters or so. And this is the final run towards Ugborough Beacon. So if we have a look on the terrain here, you can see we'd made our way all the way down. We had to drop right down to this final river and then make one hell of a steep ascent all the way back up to Ugborough Beacon at the top. And so what we're left with is this beautiful multicolored line running from one end of Dartmoor all the way down to the other. So our mission was a complete and utter success. We managed to stay within the 25-meter boundary as established by Tom Davies, aka GeoWizard, and we are thoroughly proud of what we achieved.